She breastfed the rejected Lakota baby, what his father did when he came to get him silenced everyone. It was a quiet morning on the edge of the Lakota reservation, and Maya had already started her day with her usual routine. She had always been someone who felt deeply for people, especially children, and over the years she had learned to listen to the unspoken cries of those who needed help the most. That morning, as she walked along the dusty path leading to the small clinic where she volunteered, she felt a sense of anticipation mixed with unease. Something told her that today would be different. Maya had been volunteering at the reservation for several months now, helping with basic health care, offering guidance to mothers, and sometimes just holding a hand when someone felt alone. She loved the Lakota people and had great respect for their traditions. At the same time, she knew that life could be cruel, and she had seen many families struggle with poverty, illness, and heartache. She had learned that sometimes the most important thing she could do was to simply show up and care. When she arrived at the small clinic that morning, she noticed a group of people gathered outside. Their faces were serious, anxious, and worried. Among them, she saw an elderly woman clutching a blanket tightly, and a young mother who looked exhausted and lost. The whispers in the air carried a story that made Maya's heart ache before she even knew the details. A baby had been abandoned. His mother, unable to care for him due to circumstances beyond her control, had left him in the care of the elders. The child was just a few days old, tiny and fragile, and the elders were doing everything they could, but they were not trained in modern infant care. They had no formula, no incubators, and little experience in handling a newborn in such a delicate condition. The child's cries, weak and thin, were a sound that no one could ignore. Maya was immediately drawn to the baby. When she approached, she saw him wrapped in a thin, worn blanket. His skin was pale, and his small fingers trembled slightly. The elders looked at her with a mix of hope and worry. "He needs help," one of them said softly, almost as if saying it aloud would make it real. Maya nodded. She could see the truth in their eyes. The baby needed someone willing to take a risk, to step beyond what was comfortable, and to care with nothing but love and determination. The mother had left under complicated circumstances. Maya learned that the woman was very young, frightened, and unsupported. In the community, there were whispers of judgment, of shame, but Maya didn't pay attention to that. She only saw a child who had no one to turn to, a life that hung in delicate balance, and a chance for compassion to make a real difference. Maya carefully took the baby into her arms. She felt the fragility of his small body and the warmth that came with holding him close. The baby's tiny heartbeat was faint but steady, a reminder that life, even in the most difficult circumstances, was determined to keep going. Maya knew that the hours ahead would be challenging. She would have to feed him, keep him warm, and watch over him constantly. But in that moment, she didn't hesitate. There was no second thought. All she felt was the undeniable need to protect this child. The elders gave her space but watched closely. They had seen many people come and go, offering help in small ways, but few stayed when things became difficult. Maya understood that this was more than a simple act of kindness. It was a commitment. She had to be ready for the long nights, the constant worry, and the emotional strain that would come with caring for a newborn who had already experienced so much hardship. As she sat down in the small sunlit room of the clinic, she gently unwrapped the blanket and examined the baby. He was hungry, crying softly, and his tiny stomach rose and fell in shallow breaths. Maya felt a lump in her throat. She had worked with infants before, but there was something about this child that went beyond medical care. He was not just a patient or a case. He was a life that depended entirely on her. Maya thought about what she could do. There was no formula, no donor milk available immediately, and the baby needed nourishment to survive. She realized that she had only one option that could provide what he truly needed. With careful consideration and a deep sense of responsibility, she decided to breastfeed him herself. It was a decision that required courage, humility, and compassion. She knew it might raise questions, even objections, but in her heart she knew it was the right thing to do. She began to feed the baby, holding him close and speaking softly to him. The sound of her voice seemed to calm him, and gradually his cries softened. Maya could feel the life returning to him, the strength growing with every small sip. It was a moment of quiet triumph, a victory that no one else could fully understand. In that room, with sunlight streaming through the window and the elders watching silently, a fragile bond began to form. As the day passed, Maya did not leave the baby's side. She changed his tiny clothes, cleaned him gently, and ensured that he stayed warm and safe. She told herself that she would do everything in her power to protect him, to give him a chance at life that had been so uncertain just hours before. She felt a deep connection to him, a bond that went beyond duty or responsibility. It was pure, instinctive, and human. Word of Maya's actions began to spread quietly through the reservation. Some people were skeptical, unsure if what she was doing was acceptable or appropriate. Others were curious, watching to see if the child would survive under her care. Maya did not let their opinions affect her. She focused on the baby, on his every need, and on the hope that one small act of compassion could make a difference. By the evening, the baby's cries had lessened, and he slept peacefully in Maya's arms. She felt exhausted but fulfilled. She had faced fear, uncertainty, and the weight of responsibility, yet she had chosen love over hesitation. She knew that challenges would come. Questions from the community, complications in caring for a newborn, and the inevitable arrival of the father. But in that moment, she allowed herself to feel hope, to believe that this tiny life could survive and perhaps even thrive, because someone had dared to care. As night fell over the reservation, Maya sat quietly, rocking the baby gently and humming a soft tune. The stars outside were bright, and the world felt still. She thought about how fragile life could be, how quickly it could be lost, and how much courage it sometimes took to protect it. In the silence of the clinic, with only the sound of a small heartbeat and the gentle breathing of a sleeping child, Maya felt a sense of purpose she had never known before. She had become more than a volunteer that day. She had become a lifeline. And in that moment, she knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, no matter what judgments might come, she would not turn away. The baby had been rejected by the world, but she would not reject him. She would care for him, protect him, and give him the love and nourishment he deserved. And perhaps in doing so, she would change not only his life, but the hearts of everyone who witnessed her courage and compassion. The days that followed the baby's arrival were some of the most intense of Maya's life. She quickly realized that caring for a newborn who had been abandoned was not just about feeding and changing diapers. It was about constant vigilance, patience, and the quiet courage to face the unknown. Every morning she would wake before sunrise, gently checking the baby's breathing and listening to the soft rise and fall of his chest. Each tiny sound, each flutter of his eyelids was a reminder of how fragile life could be and how precious every moment was. At first, the elders and other community members watched Maya with cautious curiosity. Some of them whispered among themselves, questioning her actions. They had never seen a woman from outside the reservation take such an unusual step, breastfeeding a child who was not her own. "Is it proper?" some asked quietly. Others were more direct. "Why is she doing this? This child has a family," they said. But Maya did not allow their doubts to distract her. She focused entirely on the baby, knowing that what mattered was his health and his survival. The baby, whom Maya had begun to call Little Bear, slowly began to show signs of strength. His tiny hands, once weak and trembling, now grasped gently at her fingers. His eyes, which had been dull and unfocused, began to open wider, following her movements and blinking curiously at the light around him. Each small sign of progress filled Maya with hope and determination. She had learned that with abandoned children, every tiny victory was worth celebrating. Maya also realized that Little Bear's needs were not just physical. He craved warmth, comfort, and the security of being held. Many nights she would sit by the small window of the clinic, rocking him gently in her arms while the stars shone above. She would hum soft songs, some she had learned as a child, some she had picked up from the elders, creating a small bridge between her world and his. Little Bear responded to the sound of her voice, settling into peaceful sleep as if he knew, somehow, that he was finally safe. But it was not all easy. There were moments of fear and doubt, when the baby cried inconsolably, when he refused to feed, or when Maya felt overwhelmed by the weight of responsibility. There were nights she spent awake, holding him close and watching for any sign of trouble. She had learned to trust her instincts, to respond to every need quickly, and to remain calm even when her own heart raced with worry. Each challenge taught her patience, resilience, and the depth of her own compassion. As the days turned into weeks, word of Maya's care began to spread quietly through the community. Some people were inspired, seeing the love and dedication she showed. Others were skeptical, worried about cultural boundaries and traditions. Maya understood these concerns and respected them, but she also knew that her focus had to remain on Little Bear. She could not control everyone's opinions. She could only control the love and care she offered him. During this time, Maya also became aware of the baby's mother, a young woman named Lena. Lena had left the child out of fear, shame, and the feeling that she could not provide for him. She had been overwhelmed by her own struggles and had thought she had no choice. Maya did not judge her. Instead, she hoped that one day Lena might find the courage to see that her child was alive, thriving, and cared for. For now, Maya knew that her role was to give the baby the nurturing he needed, regardless of past decisions. The community slowly began to notice the change in the baby. From a fragile, weak infant, Little Bear had become lively and alert. His eyes sparkled with curiosity, and he began to respond to gentle touches and soft voices. The elders started to acknowledge Maya's efforts more openly, some even offering small gestures of support, extra blankets, warm water, and simple words of encouragement. It was clear that her commitment was making a real difference, not only in the baby's life, but in the hearts of those who observed her actions. Despite the progress, Maya knew the challenges were still ahead. Caring for a child under these circumstances was not just about the present. She had to think about the future, about what would happen when the baby's father or other family members came forward. The thought made her both anxious and determined. She resolved that no matter what occurred, she would advocate for the child's well-being and ensure that he continued to receive love and care. Maya also noticed how the experience was changing her. She had always considered herself compassionate, but now she understood the true depth of human responsibility. Love was not just about feelings. It was about action, sacrifice, and the willingness to stand firm in difficult moments. She had learned to trust herself, to rely on her instincts, and to find strength in the quiet moments of connection with a tiny life that depended entirely on her. Little Bear began to show personality even at this early age. He would sometimes smile in his sleep, twitch his tiny fingers when he was excited, or turn his head toward her voice even from across the room. These small moments became a source of joy and reassurance for Maya. Each laugh, each blink, each sign of curiosity felt like a victory, proof that her efforts were not in vain. The baby was thriving, and she had played a central role in giving him a chance at life. One afternoon, as Maya was sitting with Little Bear, she noticed a young man standing outside the clinic, watching silently. She did not recognize him at first, but something in his posture and expression told her that he was searching for someone, or perhaps something. Maya felt a knot in her stomach. She knew that it could be the father of the baby. She did not panic, but she also knew that she had to be prepared for a difficult conversation. She could not predict how he would react, but she resolved to remain calm, respectful, and focused on the child's best interests. The tension in the community grew as rumors spread about a possible arrival. People whispered about what might happen if the father came to claim the child. Some feared conflict, others feared that the baby might be taken away from the care that had nurtured him back to health. Maya, however, focused only on what she could control, the baby in her arms and the safety and comfort she could provide. She knew that whatever happened, her primary responsibility was to ensure that Little Bear remained loved and cared for. As the day of the anticipated arrival approached, Maya prepared herself. She organized the clinic, made sure there were extra supplies, and thought through how she would handle any situation with compassion and firmness. She did not want confrontation, but she also knew that she could not step back from the child's needs. She practiced patience and empathy, understanding that emotions would run high and that the right approach required both courage and sensitivity. When the day finally came, Maya felt a mix of emotions: nervousness, anticipation, and hope. She could not predict how the father would respond, how the community would react, or what challenges lay ahead, but she felt ready to face whatever came next, knowing that she had given her all to protect and care for Little Bear. In those weeks leading up to the father's arrival, Maya had learned important lessons about love, courage, and human connection. She had discovered the power of empathy, the importance of action over judgment, and the strength that comes from committing fully to someone else's well-being. She had seen firsthand that life could be fragile, that people could be misunderstood, and that compassion could bridge gaps that fear and tradition sometimes could not. Little Bear's eyes sparkled as he looked up at her, and in that moment Maya felt a quiet certainty. No matter what happened next, she had done everything in her power to give this child a chance. She had nurtured him, protected him, and loved him as if he were her own. And she knew that this bond, fragile yet strong, would shape the events to come in ways no one could predict. As the sun set over the reservation, casting a golden glow over the clinic, Maya held Little Bear close, feeling the warmth of his small body and the life that pulsed within him. She had faced fear, uncertainty, and judgment, but she had also experienced the quiet triumph of saving a life through compassion and courage. The future was uncertain, but she knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, the bond they had formed would remain unbreakable. Maya's heart swelled with quiet pride. She had stepped into a moment of crisis and chosen love over hesitation. She had given a fragile life the chance to flourish, and, in doing so, had touched the hearts of those around her. The weeks of care, the sleepless nights, and the endless worry had all led to this point, a tiny child thriving because someone believed that every life was worth fighting for. The morning of the father's arrival dawned quietly over the reservation. The sky was painted with soft hues of pink and orange, and the air carried a crisp chill. Maya could feel a strange mix of anticipation and anxiety in her chest. For weeks, she had cared for little Bear, watching him grow stronger and healthier each day. But now, she knew that her journey with the baby would face a new test, the arrival of the one person who had a legal and biological claim to him. As she prepared the small clinic for the day, she wrapped little Bear in a fresh blanket, gently brushing a stray lock of dark hair from his forehead. He stirred in her arms, blinking sleepily, and reached up to touch her cheek with a tiny hand. Maya smiled softly, feeling the familiar warmth of their bond. "It's okay, little Bear," she whispered. "Whatever happens today, I promise I'll keep you safe." The community was unusually quiet that morning. The elders moved about slowly, their eyes cast downward, exchanging silent words of concern. Rumors had spread that the father, a young man named Jonah, was on his way. Maya had heard little about him except that he had been distant from the mother during her pregnancy and had only recently learned of the baby's existence. The uncertainty of his intentions made Maya's heart race. She did not know if he would be angry, fearful, or grateful. All she knew was that little Bear's well-being depended on her ability to remain calm and thoughtful. Hours passed slowly. Maya kept herself busy checking the baby's temperature, tidying the clinic, and preparing a small meal. Every sound outside made her glance toward the door, and every shadow seemed to carry the possibility of Jonah's arrival. She tried to steady her thoughts. She knew that her role was not only to care for the baby, but also to model patience and empathy in a situation charged with emotion. Finally, footsteps echoed on the dusty path leading to the clinic. Maya looked up, and there he was, a young man in his early 20s, tall and lean, with dark hair and sharp features. There was tension in his posture, a cautiousness in his eyes, but also a hint of uncertainty, as if he himself were not sure how to feel. Jonah's gaze immediately fell on little Bear, and for a moment the world seemed to hold its breath. Maya took a deep breath and stood slowly, holding little Bear protectively. She approached Jonah with a calm and steady presence, her voice gentle but firm. "Hello," she said softly. "You must be Jonah." He nodded, his eyes flicking between her face and the baby in her arms. There was a flicker of recognition in his expression, followed by a wave of emotions that he clearly tried to hide. Confusion, fear, and a touch of guilt. I came to get him," Jonah said finally, his voice low and uncertain. "He's my son." His words carried weight, but they were tempered by hesitation, as if even he was unsure of his right to claim him after all this time. Maya nodded slowly, understanding the complexity of the situation. "I know," she replied, "and he is your son. I've been caring for him because he needed immediate help. I want you to see that he's healthy, safe, and loved." Jonah took a cautious step closer, his eyes scanning the baby. He reached out slowly, unsure if he was allowed to touch him, and then paused. Maya noticed the tension in his body, the conflict written across his face. She realized that Jonah's emotions were raw. Anger, regret, love, and fear all mixed together. She decided to speak again, her words calm and measured. "He's been through a lot in the last few days. I've tried to help him recover. I hope you can see that I have nothing but his best interests at heart." Jonah's expression softened slightly, but his eyes remained uncertain. He knelt down, keeping a careful distance, and whispered to the baby, "Hey there, little one, I'm your dad." Little Bear, sensing the unfamiliar voice, stirred and looked toward Jonah. Maya watched closely, ready to intervene if the baby became upset, but instead, something remarkable happened. Little Bear reached his tiny hand toward Jonah, as if recognizing him in a way Maya had never imagined. The gesture was small but powerful, and it seemed to melt the tension in the room. Jonah's eyes filled with emotion. He took a deep breath and allowed himself to kneel fully beside the baby. I didn't know how to find you," he admitted, his voice breaking slightly. "I should have been there before. I don't know." He trailed off, unable to finish his thought. Maya remained silent, giving him space, understanding that this was a moment of reckoning for both father and child. The elders, who had been watching quietly, began to nod subtly, recognizing the sincerity in Jonah's actions. The community, once tense and uncertain, began to feel a sense of relief. Here was a young man who had come, not with anger or blame, but with a desire to connect with his son. Maya observed him carefully, ready to support the bond while ensuring the baby's safety. Jonah reached out slowly and allowed his hand to brush against Little Bear's cheek. The baby responded instinctively, leaning into the touch and curling his tiny fingers around Jonah's hand. Maya felt a lump in her throat. She realized that this simple moment, a father reaching out to his child, was more powerful than any words could describe. It was a testament to love, to vulnerability, and to the human capacity for change. Maya spoke gently, breaking the silence. "Jonah, you don't have to do this alone," she said. "He needs both of you in his life, and I will help however I can. The most important thing is that he feels safe and loved." Jonah looked at her, surprise evident in his eyes. He had expected confrontation, resistance, perhaps even hostility, but instead he found understanding and support. For the first time, he allowed himself to feel gratitude toward Maya, recognizing the sacrifices she had made for his child. They spent hours together that day, Jonah learning how to hold Little Bear properly, how to soothe him when he cried, and how to understand his subtle signals. Maya guided him patiently, never judging, always encouraging. She explained the baby's routine, his feeding schedule, and the small ways in which he expressed happiness or discomfort. Jonah absorbed every detail, grateful for the guidance and slowly learning how to become a father he had once feared he could not be. During their time together, Jonah shared fragments of his story. He spoke of the fear and uncertainty that had kept him away, of the mistakes he had made, and of the hope he now carried for the future. Maya listened carefully, offering empathy without judgment. She understood that parenting was not simple, that love sometimes arrived late, and that courage could take many forms. Her role was to help Jonah find that courage while protecting the child he had been separated from. The bond between father and son grew stronger with each passing hour. Little Bear, who had already begun to thrive under Maya's care, now responded to Jonah with recognition and trust. He smiled when Jonah spoke, calmed when Jonah held him, and even cooed softly in response to his laughter. Maya watched with quiet satisfaction, knowing that her efforts had created the foundation for a healthy, loving connection. By the end of the day, Jonah had transformed from a hesitant, uncertain young man into a father who understood the weight and joy of his responsibility. He knelt beside Maya, his voice steady but emotional. "Thank you," he said simply. "I don't know how to repay you for what you've done, but thank you." Maya smiled, shaking her head gently. "No repayment is needed. Love and care are not debts. They are choices. And you have made the choice to be here for your son. That is what matters." The community, witnessing this transformation, began to whisper among themselves. Many were impressed by Jonah's humility and willingness to learn. Others felt a sense of hope, seeing that a child could be nurtured and loved despite difficult beginnings. Maya realized that this moment was bigger than just the two of them. It was a lesson for everyone watching that patience, understanding, and compassion could heal even the most fragile bonds. As evening fell, Jonah held Little Bear in his arms, rocking him gently, while Maya stood nearby, watching with a sense of quiet pride. The baby, once abandoned and fragile, now slept peacefully between the arms of the people who loved him most. Maya understood that her role was evolving, from sole caretaker to guide, mentor, and supporter of a father learning to embrace his responsibilities. The day ended with a sense of peace and hope. Jonah thanked Maya again, promising to remain an active, loving presence in his son's life. Maya, feeling a mixture of relief and satisfaction, knew that this was only the beginning of a long journey for both father and child. But she also knew that the foundation had been laid, a foundation built on trust, love, and the courage to do what was right. That night, Maya sat alone in the clinic reflecting on the day. She thought about the fragility of life, the power of compassion, and the unexpected ways in which love could manifest. Little Bear's journey had been difficult, but it was also filled with hope, courage, and the possibility of healing. And she knew, deep in her heart, that this was a story that would continue to unfold, one day at a time, with love at its center. The days after Jonah's arrival were filled with quiet adjustment. Little Bear had started to recognize his father, and Jonah was learning the delicate rhythms of parenting. But the tension in the community was still palpable. People whispered, some admiring Jonah's courage, others skeptical of his intentions. Maya felt the weight of responsibility pressing on her once again. She had nurtured the baby when he had no one else, and now she had to navigate a delicate balance, helping Jonah become a father while protecting Little Bear from sudden shocks or confusion. Maya noticed that Jonah, though eager and willing, was still uncertain about his role. Every time the baby cried, Jonah would hesitate, unsure if he was holding him correctly or responding properly. Maya stepped in patiently, guiding him with gentle words. "You're doing fine," she would say, demonstrating how to soothe the baby. "He needs to feel your presence, not just your hands. Speak softly, let him hear your voice." Jonah listened carefully, trying to absorb every tip. Slowly, he began to gain confidence, holding Little Bear more naturally, speaking in a calmer voice, and even smiling when the baby responded. It was during one of these quiet afternoons that something unexpected happened, something that would change the perception of everyone watching. A gathering of elders and community members had come to the clinic, curious to witness the developing bond between father and child. They wanted to see if Jonah would rise to the challenge of fatherhood or if he would falter under the responsibility. Maya understood the stakes. She knew that in this community actions often spoke louder than words, and the elder's approval mattered deeply. Jonah was holding Little Bear when an elder spoke softly from the doorway. "Son, your child is safe," he said, his voice calm but firm. "But you must show him that you are willing to step fully into your role." Jonah looked down at his son, then at Maya. For a moment, he seemed unsure. He had never faced an audience like this, and he felt the pressure mounting. The whispers of the community filled the room like a soft hum, each person silently judging, hoping, and waiting for him to prove himself. Then Jonah did something that stunned everyone. He knelt fully in front of the elders, holding Little Bear close to his chest, and looked up with an expression of deep sincerity. "I know I was absent," he began, his voice steady despite the emotions he felt. "I made mistakes. I was afraid. I was unsure, and I didn't know how to step forward. But I am here now. I will care for my son. I will protect him, love him, and do everything in my power to be the father he deserves. And I want to thank Maya for giving me the courage to begin this journey." The room fell completely silent. Maya felt a shiver run down her spine. The weight of Jonah's words, the honesty in his voice, and the vulnerability in his posture created a moment that no one could ignore. The elders, who had watched skeptically for weeks, exchanged glances of surprise and approval. Community members who had whispered doubts and speculation were now quietly nodding, realizing that Jonah's actions spoke louder than any words of judgment could. Maya stepped back slightly, giving Jonah the space to connect with his son. She could see the emotion in his eyes, the tears he fought to hold back, and the determination that now radiated from him. Little Bear responded instinctively, nuzzling closer to Jonah, his small arms wrapping around his father's neck in a gesture that seemed to communicate trust and recognition. It was a simple moment, but it carried a weight that was extraordinary, a moment that would be remembered in the community for years to come. The elders slowly approached, one by one, offering quiet words of encouragement. "You have done well," said one, placing a gentle hand on Jonah's shoulder. "You have shown that love and responsibility can overcome fear and absence." Another elder nodded, adding, "Your son feels your presence. That is the most important thing. You must continue to honor it." Jonah listened respectfully, absorbing their guidance, and nodded with humility. For the first time, he truly understood that fatherhood was not about power or pride. It was about love, consistency, and the willingness to step fully into someone else's life. Maya watched the interaction quietly, her heart swelling with pride and relief. She had worried that the father might reject the baby, react with anger, or even take him without thought for his well-being. Instead, Jonah had embraced responsibility with courage and sincerity. She realized that her role was shifting again, from caregiver to mentor, witnessing a young man transform into the father his child needed. As the afternoon continued, Jonah began to take the lead in Little Bear's care. He fed him with guidance from Maya, changed his clothes, and soothed him when he cried. He even began to recognize the subtle cues of the baby's needs, the way he turned his head when hungry, the soft coo when he was content, and the small movements that indicated discomfort. Each time Jonah responded correctly, Maya offered quiet praise, knowing that positive reinforcement would help him gain confidence and deepen his bond with the child. Community members watched closely, their skepticism slowly giving way to admiration. Many were impressed by Jonah's willingness to learn and adapt. Some whispered to each other, noting how rare it was to see a young man take responsibility so earnestly. Others reflected silently on the lessons of patience, empathy, and courage they had witnessed. Maya understood that this was more than just a family moment. It was a teaching moment for the entire community. By evening, a sense of calm settled over the clinic. Jonah was holding Little Bear in his arms, sitting quietly while the baby slept peacefully against his chest. Maya stood nearby, offering quiet support and reassurance. The elders had departed, leaving behind a feeling of approval and respect. Jonah's transformation was complete in that moment, not because he had proven himself to anyone, but because he had embraced the responsibility of love fully and sincerely. Maya reflected on how far they had come in just a few weeks. Little Bear, once abandoned and fragile, was thriving. Jonah, once uncertain and hesitant, had become a committed and loving father. And the community, once filled with doubt and speculation, had witnessed a remarkable display of courage, empathy, and transformation. It was a powerful reminder that love, when guided by patience and sincerity, could overcome fear, doubt, and the harshest judgments. Later that night, Jonah thanked Maya again, his voice soft but filled with emotion. "I can never repay you for what you've done," he said. "You saved my son and showed me how to be a father. I will never forget this. Maya smiled, shaking her head gently. There's no repayment necessary, she said. Love doesn't require payment. It only requires courage and the willingness to act. Jonah nodded, understanding fully what she meant. As Maya prepared to leave the clinic that evening, she paused to look at the small family she had helped bring together. Little Bear was sleeping peacefully, Jonah's arms steady and protective around him. The room was filled with a quiet sense of peace, hope, and the unspoken understanding that this was the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter defined by love, responsibility, and the power of compassion to change lives. Maya walked outside into the cool evening air, taking a deep breath. The stars were beginning to appear, shining brightly over the reservation. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment and gratitude. She had faced uncertainty, fear, and challenges, but through it all, she had remained steadfast in her commitment to care for a fragile life. Now she could see the ripple effects of her actions, the bond between father and child, the respect of the elders, and the hope that had been restored in the hearts of those watching. In the days that followed, Jonah continued to grow more confident as a father. He woke for late-night feedings, soothed Little Bear during bouts of restlessness, and learned to anticipate his son's needs. Maya remained nearby, offering guidance when necessary but allowing Jonah to take the lead. The baby thrived under their combined care, gaining strength and showing early signs of curiosity and joy. The community continued to watch, many quietly admiring the transformation that had occurred in their midst. Maya realized that this experience had changed her as well. She had learned the depth of human resilience, the power of empathy, and the remarkable ways in which love could transform not just a single life, but an entire community. Jonah's courage, combined with her care and guidance, had created a foundation of trust, respect, and hope, and she knew that this story of compassion, responsibility, and the courage to act would be remembered long after the baby had grown. By the end of the week, Little Bear was thriving, Jonah was confident in his role, and Maya felt a quiet sense of completion. She knew that challenges would come in the future, as they always did, but she also knew that love, patience, and understanding had created something lasting and extraordinary. The baby had been abandoned once, but now he was safe, loved, and surrounded by people willing to fight for him every day. Maya took one last look at the small family before leaving the clinic that night. Jonah was softly singing to Little Bear, his voice steady and warm. The baby responded, cooing and curling closer to his father. Maya felt a tear slip down her cheek, a mixture of joy and pride. She had witnessed something remarkable, a transformation that began with vulnerability and fear, but ended with love, courage, and connection. The weeks that followed were filled with quiet joy and steady progress. Little Bear, once fragile and abandoned, was now a thriving baby full of life and curiosity. His tiny fingers grasped eagerly at the toys Maya and Jonah had brought for him, and his bright eyes followed every movement around him. Jonah, now more confident as a father, had settled into a steady routine, feeding, holding, and soothing his son with increasing skill and tenderness. Maya watched them closely, offering guidance when needed, but giving the father the space to grow into his new role. It was remarkable to see the transformation in both father and child. Jonah had learned not only the mechanics of parenting, feeding schedules, diaper changes, and sleep routines, but also the subtle language of love that Little Bear had been missing. He learned to recognize the tiny shifts in expression that indicated happiness, hunger, or discomfort. He learned that fatherhood was not about authority or control, but about presence, patience, and responsiveness. Maya could see the pride in his eyes, a quiet pride that came from knowing he was truly making a difference in his son's life. Maya herself felt a sense of fulfillment unlike anything she had experienced before. She had stepped into a situation where a child's life hung in the balance, and through patience, compassion, and courage, she had helped create a safe, nurturing environment. She had not only saved a life, but had helped a young man discover the power of love and responsibility. The gratitude she felt was quiet, unspoken, but profound, a deep recognition that her actions had rippled far beyond what she could immediately see. The community around them began to change as well. People who had once whispered in doubt now looked on with admiration and respect. They saw Jonah's commitment to his child and the unwavering care Maya had provided. Conversations that had been filled with judgment and concern were now filled with curiosity and hope. Mothers and fathers asked questions, seeking advice on how to support their own children. Elders nodded approvingly, recognizing that what had begun as a fragile situation had turned into a lesson in courage, empathy, and the power of human connection. One afternoon, Jonah took Little Bear for a walk along the dusty path outside the clinic. Maya followed behind, carrying a small bag of essentials. The sun was warm on their faces, and the gentle breeze carried the scent of wild flowers and pine. Little Bear cooed happily in his father's arms, reaching out to touch everything he saw. Jonah smiled, feeling a sense of joy he had never known before. "I can't believe how lucky I am," he said quietly, almost to himself. "I almost missed this. I almost lost him before I even had a chance to know him." Maya nodded, smiling softly. "It's not luck," she said. "It's love, patience, and courage. You stepped forward when it mattered most. That's what made this possible." Jonah looked at her, eyes shining with gratitude. "I'll never forget what you did for us," he said. "You didn't just save my son, you saved me too. You showed me how to be the father he deserves." As they walked, they passed other families from the reservation. Children played nearby, laughing and chasing one another, while parents watched with gentle smiles. Some of the elders nodded in greeting, acknowledging the bond that had formed between father and son and the role Maya had played in nurturing it. It was a quiet, everyday moment, but it carried the weight of transformation. Lives had been changed, lessons had been learned, and hope had been restored. Over the following months, Jonah grew more confident and independent in his role as a father. He learned to anticipate Little Bear's needs, to soothe him during bouts of fussiness, and to celebrate his small victories. He laughed with his son, sang to him, and created a home filled with warmth and stability. Maya remained a supportive presence, offering guidance when needed, but stepping back to let Jonah take ownership of his new responsibilities. The baby thrived under their combined care, growing stronger and more curious every day. One evening, Jonah sat in the quiet of the clinic with Little Bear in his arms. The baby was sleepy, eyes half closed, but still alert enough to respond to Jonah's gentle hum. Jonah's heart was full of emotions: pride, love, gratitude, and a deep sense of responsibility. He thought back to the days when he had been absent, when fear and uncertainty had kept him from stepping forward. Now, holding his son close, he understood that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to act in spite of it. Maya watched them from across the room, feeling a quiet sense of completion. She knew that her role in the story was evolving yet again. She had been the lifeline for a fragile child, the guide for a young father, and the witness to a remarkable transformation. But now she realized that her work here had reached a natural turning point. Jonah was ready, Little Bear was thriving, and the community had seen the power of love in action. Maya felt a sense of satisfaction that went beyond words, an understanding that sometimes the greatest reward comes from watching life flourish because of one's care and dedication. The elders invited Jonah and Little Bear to a small gathering in the heart of the reservation. It was a celebration of family, community, and the resilience of life. Jonah held Little Bear close as they entered the circle, feeling the warmth and support of those around him. The elders spoke softly, acknowledging the growth, responsibility, and courage that Jonah had demonstrated. They praised Maya for her unwavering compassion and dedication, recognizing that she had played a crucial role in helping both father and child. Jonah listened with humility, realizing that his journey had been shaped not only by his own choices, but by the guidance and support of others. He looked down at Little Bear, who was now smiling and reaching out to touch the faces around him. In that moment, he understood fully the depth of his responsibility and the power of love to transform lives. He felt a deep gratitude for Maya, for the elders, and for the community that had witnessed their journey. As the months passed, life settled into a new rhythm. Little Bear grew stronger, reaching milestones with enthusiasm. First smiles, first sounds, first tentative movements. Jonah celebrated each moment, learning to embrace the small joys of parenting with patience and delight. Maya continued to check in, offering advice and encouragement, but she allowed Jonah to take the lead, knowing that he had become the father his son needed. The bond between father and son deepened with each passing day. Little Bear responded to Jonah with trust, curiosity, and affection. He laughed when Jonah played with him, calmed when Jonah held him, and learned to explore the world under the watchful guidance of a loving parent. Jonah, in turn, discovered the joy of giving without expectation, of nurturing without judgment, and of loving fully and unconditionally. Maya reflected on the entire journey. The fragile newborn abandoned and alone, the uncertain young father, and the skeptical community. She realized that what had begun as a story of vulnerability had transformed into a story of resilience, love, and hope. Every challenge had been met with courage. Every fear had been confronted with patience, and every moment of doubt had been overcome with compassion. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jonah sat outside with Little Bear in his lap. The baby was sleepy but content, his tiny fingers curling around Jonah's hand. Jonah thought back to the first days he had spent away from his son, the fear and regret that had almost kept him from stepping forward. Now, he felt a sense of peace and fulfillment. He had embraced responsibility, nurtured life, and created a home filled with love and stability. Maya joined them, sitting quietly beside Jonah. She looked at the father and son, smiling softly. "You've done well," she said gently. "Look at him. He's thriving because of your love and care." Jonah nodded, a tear sliding down his cheek. "I never imagined it could be like this," he said. "I never imagined I could feel this. Complete. Thank you, Maya, for everything." Maya shook her head, smiling warmly. "You did the work. You made the choice to be present, to love, to protect. I only helped you see what was already inside you." Jonah looked down at Little Bear, who was now drifting into a peaceful sleep, and felt a profound sense of gratitude. He knew that his life had changed forever, and that his son's life had been transformed because someone had chosen to act with courage and love. The story of Little Bear, Jonah, and Maya became one that the community would remember for years. It was a story of compassion overcoming fear, of love transcending uncertainty, and of the incredible strength that humans can show when they act selflessly. Families in the reservation often referred to it as a lesson in courage and empathy, teaching young parents the value of responsibility, presence, and unconditional care. As time went on, Little Bear continued to grow in health, curiosity, and happiness. Jonah remained a devoted father, learning continuously, adapting, and loving with a depth he had never known. Maya continued her work in the community, inspired by the transformation she had witnessed, using her experiences to guide others in the care of children and families in need. Together, they had created more than just a safe environment. They had created a lasting example of what love, dedication, and courage could accomplish. One quiet evening, Jonah held Little Bear in his arms, looking up at the sky filled with stars. He felt a sense of completion and hope, knowing that his son's future was filled with love, guidance, and opportunity. Maya stood nearby, quietly reflecting on the journey that had begun with a tiny abandoned baby and grown into a story of courage, empathy, and lasting human connection. And in that peaceful moment, everyone present understood something simple but profound: that life, no matter how fragile, can flourish when met with love, patience, and unwavering commitment. Little Bear had been given a second chance, and in doing so, he had given everyone around him hope, joy, and the powerful reminder that kindness and courage can change lives forever.